Oh, yeah.
Told me.
Shouldn't we go?
No, just
Okay, we start
coffee or something.
a new parak. So it starts on 83, 83b, the new chapter. Kol karbonis atzibur v'hayachid, all community sacrifices. It really means offerings, because here we're dealing with the meal offerings as opposed to animals, or individual offerings. Ba'im min haaretz, they come from what grew in the land of Israel, or mechutz la'aretz, or grew outside the land of Israel. You can use the grain that grew outside the land of Israel, imported. Min hachadash and min hayashan. It could be from the new crops. We're talking about after the Omer was brought in, or min hayashan, it could be from the stored grain from last year. Chutz min ha'omer v'shtei halechem, except for the two sacrifices. These sacrifices, these two, the Omer and the shtei halechem, the one that was brought on Pesach and the one that was brought on Shavuos, she'einen bon ela min hachadash min haaretz. These are required to be brought from the new grain, the recently harvested grain, and it needs to have grown in the land of Israel, not imported. And all of them are brought from the best of the grain. Which grain is the best? It gives us two cities. Machnes Zatcha. I'm sure the Moroccans would say Meknes. It's a city in Morocco. But these are two cities. It says Alpha. These are first. Alpha is in Aleph, or Alpha Beta.
Where were
The
they?
Silas. I don't know.
It sounds like it's Israel.
Let's see what it says. It has to be Eretz Yisrael because certain sacrifices need to be from Eretz Yisrael. It doesn't say. Okay. And Shni Alehem. What is the second best? It says Aforium Debika. It's from Aforium. Now it says that there was two Aphorayim. There were two of them. There was one on the mountain, one in the valley, and this is from the valley. This was good grain. There's different kirsayis here. Some say it's Kafraim and it means a village. Okay. Kol haratzis hayksheris. Ela mikan hayamivim. It was all kosher, but these they would bring from here because this was better. The Gemara makes an assumption that what the Mishnah says, that all sacrifices can come from the land of Israel or not from the land of Israel, except for these two, and that these, and they need to be they could be from the old grain or the new grain, except for these two. That when we say except for these two, it means that if you don't do for these two, it's not valid. Because these two sacrifices, the Omer and the Shtei Halechem, it needs to be from the new grain, and it needs to be from the land of Israel. That's the assumption that the Gemara makes about this Mishnah. That's because I could learn this Mishnah that it's supposed to be from the new grain. It doesn't tell me that it has to be. But the assumption is that if it's not done like that, it's invalid. Our Mishnah does not go according to the following teaching of the Tana. The Tanya was taught in a Braisa. Omer haba min hayashan, kosher. If the Omer sacrifice, which is brought on Pesach from barley, comes from last year's grain, it's still valid. Shtei halechem Bais min hayashan ksheris. The two loaves of bread that come from last year's grain, it's brought on Shavuos, it's also kosher. Ela shachisa mitzvah. It's just that it's lacking in the mitzvah. You could have done it better. Still kosher. Omer, the barley that's brought on, the barley offering that's brought on Pesach, Diksiv takreves minchas bekurecha. It says you shall bring your first mincha. Va'afilu min aliyah. You can even bring from the grain that you had in the attic. That means last year's grain, the stored grain. Shtei alechem diksiv mimosh v'seichem taviyu. Shtei alechem. That how do we know that it's valid? If it comes from last year, it says mimosh v'seichem, from your dwelling place. That tells me two things. First of all, v'loy min chutz la'aretz, but it can't come from outside the land of Israel. But it also tells me mimosh v'seichem va'afilu min aliyah. From your dwelling place, it could even come from the attic. The Gemara rejects could you say that you learned two things from one word? Ha'apiksei. You already used it. You said mimosh v'seichem means that it needs to come from the land of Israel. Now you're saying that you say that mimosh v'seichem from your dwelling place tells me that it can come even from the attic. Amarkara taviyu. In the pasuk, we're referencing the pasuk, but we reference the wrong word. It says mimosh v'seichem taviyu, from your dwelling place you should bring, and we're referring to the taviyu part of the pasuk. Mimosh v'seichem tells me that it needs to be from the land of Israel. Taviyu, you shall bring. That tells me v'afilu min aliyah, even from the attic. It means you can even bring last year's grain, the stored grain. Now the Gemara uses its memory from last week and from several months ago. It says v'haimi boile shekol shatem mevim makom acher hareu kozeh. Last week we learned that the shtei alechem comes from the two breads. Each one was an omer. And that taught me that when I bring a carbon taida, that I bring 10 breads, each one is an omer. So I learned from Taviyu that you shall bring, that just like you bring the shtei alechem from an omer each, so too the 10 breads of the taida should be from an omer each. So now you're telling me that it's teaching me that you can bring from the attic. So the Gemara says no. Im kein lichtav kratavi. Tavi is a singular. You shall bring. My taviyu. What does it mean? You shall bring in plural. Shema min hatarti. So I learned two things. First of all, you should bring also the taida from 10 loaves of the taida. Each one is nisaran, and also that you can bring even from the attic. It could be stored grain. Okay, now the Gemara has some questions on this. It says vaksiv reishis. What do you mean you can bring from the stored grain? It says it needs to be the first of the grain. That's the mitzvah. That means that you should be from the first of the grain, but it doesn't mean it's invalid if it's not. Haksiv chadasha. It says it needs to be new. It says no. New is not telling me exactly this. I need that word new. It says mincha chadasha, a new mincha. I need it to tell me something else. L'kedetanya, as it was taught in a Bais. Rav Nassan and Rabbi Akiva. Rav Nassan and Rabbi Akiva Amru, they both say that shtei alechem habayis min hayoshen ksheris, that the 2 loaves of bread, if it comes from last year's grain, it's still kosher. Very interesting. They also won't fit with our Mishnah. But however, mani mekayim chadasha. What do I do with the word chadasha? It says it needs to be new. Shetei chadasha l'kol hamenachos. That even though last year's, even though the new crop can only be brought, a mincha from the new crop can only be brought after the shtei alechem, but it doesn't mean the shtei alechem itself needs to be from the new crop. The shtei alechem itself could be from last year's crop. So what does it mean it's new? It means that after that, you can bring all the new crops. It means this is like the opening for all the new grain to be brought. It doesn't mean that this itself needs to be new. It means that this is the new opening for all of the other grain to come, for the new grain to come as a mincha. Okay, now the Gemara points out that until here we're discussing not where the grain was grown, but we're discussing the different opinions of what time the grain was grown. Was it last year or was it this year? We said that it's machlokes. Our Mishnah says that the grain for the omer needs to be grown this year, the new crop. We have these brises that say that it could be from last year. It says the psukim that it should be the new crop. So okay, that's for a mitzvah. Mitzvah means that that's what you should do. But It doesn't mean that if you didn't do that, it's ma'akev. Okay. Ad kan lei pligi yala b'chadash. This whole machlekes was only about the new crops. Turning on to page 84. Aval ba'aretz. But regarding if it was grown in the land of Israel, lei pligi, there is no argument. Oimer v'shtei alechem me'eretz in, mechutz la'aretz lei. Everyone agrees that from the Omer, these two sacrifices of the Omer, which is brought on Pesach, and the 2 loaves of bread, which are brought on Shavuos, they need to be grown in the land of Israel. If they grew outside the land of Israel, it's no good. You can't have imported grain. Timan. This opinion, Deloiki Haitana, does not go according to the following opinion that we have in a Braisa. The Tanya was taught in a Braisa. Rabbi Yosi bar Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yosi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, says, Omer ba mechutz la'aretz. You can bring the Omer from the grain that grows outside of the land of Israel. Mani makayim ki savayo al aretz. The pasuk says, speak to the Jewish people and say to them, when you come into the land that I give to you, and you will harvest the new harvest, you will bring the Omer, the first of the grain of the crop to the kohen. What does it mean when you will come into the land? If you can bring the crop from outside the land, what does it mean when you will come into the land? And what it means is that means that you didn't need to bring a karban omer before they entered into the land. They didn't need to bring the karban omer in the desert. Kisavayo al aretz is coming to exclude the desert. Doesn't mean that you need to bring the grain from the land of Israel, as the other opinions hold. Kisavayo, when you'll come into the land, one opinion holds that means that the grain of the karban omer needs to have grown in the land of Israel. The other opinion says it's not coming to tell you where the grain is grown. It's coming to tell you from when on you need to bring it. It's the chronological, when you will come into the land. But according to this opinion, according to this opinion, you can't eat the new crops outside the land of Israel according to the Torah. This we didn't have. When we were discussing before what they would do on the 16th, we had all those different opinions. This one would wait until the night of the 16th, and so wait till the morning of the 17th, all these opinions. Here we're saying that according to this opinion, it's going to explain itself. Because it says from your dwelling places, and he understands what does it mean that you bring from your dwelling places. Your dwelling places doesn't have to be the land of Israel. It could mean anywhere that you live, even outside the land. When what does it mean when you will come into the land? Zman biyahi. It's just telling us the time that you come into the land. From then you need to bring. Now since Chadash is awesome in Torah, outside the land of Israel, and that's why you're allowed to bring the karban from the grain that grows outside the land of Israel. There's a major machlokes. Someone came to town, Rabbi, a fanatical rabbi. He said that anyone that eats that doesn't keep yashan, can't count them as a witness for ksuba. Took a very strong approach. There's valid heterim, there's valid heterim. It's not like usually we don't say that. We don't mix into the. Okay. But this Gemara is a source for the way of learning that where we say that Chadash is Asr Min HaTorah even outside the land of Israel, which creates a difficulty for us. If you buy flour in the store, it's the new flour. Cereal boxes and those things around now, it's already from the new grain. You have to have sold it. You have to have bought from before Pesach, and then you sell it. Yeah, there's you have to choose which chumrah you want to keep, because you can't keep them all. If you don't sell your chametz, if you don't sell chametz gamar, then you can't keep the yashan. how do you have the yashan? Because you sell the. You have to choose which one you want. Okay. Shomer Tanan Hasam. We'll start over there. Shomer Svichen b'Shvias Neitlin Tzcharin Mitshuma Salishka. It's a very interesting thing. The Omer crop. This is for the Omer or the Shtei Alechem? This is for the Omer. What they would need to guard. You see, what happens is in Shemitah is that all the fields become hefker, and anyone can just roam around and take the grain. No one owns it.
Take it home or?
Take it home. Take it home. You can't take more than there is in the field. In other words, you can't remove everything from the field because if there's nothing left in the fields, then you need to bring it back out. You need to leave some for the animals. If there's nothing left to the animals, then what's in your house? You can take it inside and store it as long as there's still stuff outside for the animals. So they would need to guard a certain area to make sure that they would have grain for the Karban Omer. What was the Karban Omer? Karban Omer was this new fresh grain of barley. They would put it inside a pipe that had holes in it, and they would roast it. It says it needed to be soft. The grain needed to be very fresh, and they would roast it there. And then it would be an offering. They would offer it onto the Mizbeach. That was on the second day of Pesach. Who would pay the watchman to watch the grain so that the poor people that would roam around would not take this grain? So it says that was paid from the temple fund. It was a fund, and that they would pay these watchmen to watch the grain. Security guards. So Rami Bar Chama or Rav Chizda. Rami Bar Chama asks his father-in-law, Rav Chizda, he asks him a question. He says, Tanan, it was taught in the Mishnah, Shemer Svichen, those that guard the grain. Now, Svichen is a type of grain that wasn't planted. What happens is, you can plant the field, but there's also, even if you don't plant it, there's going to be wild grain that's growing, because when you harvested it, certain seeds fall out of the stalks, and they'll fall on the ground and they'll grow on their own. It's not the way to grow your grain. You have to plant it properly. But there still will be, if you just leave it, there still will be individual stalks that will grow. So that's Svichen. B'Shviyas, they're Neitlin Tzchar Mitshuma Salishka. They take their payment from the temple fund. Baraminu, he asks a contradiction. La'achla v'lei l'sreifa. We have a pasuk regarding Shemitah that says that the land will be fallow. It will be for you to eat and for your servants. It says to eat. Doesn't mean to burn. You're not allowed to destroy the grain of Shemitah. And here you're taking it and you're bringing it as an offering. You're just burning it. No one's eating it. Amalei, Rachmana Amalach l'darisechem bat amrti batal. Says God says that you should bring it as a sacrifice for all generations. But you say that we should just neglect it? No, he's suggesting that we don't bring the Karban Omer on Shemitah, because you're burning it. And then you're not allowed to destroy the fruits of Shemitah. Amalei, mikamina nati batal. Did I say that we should neglect the sacrifice? Leisi midish takit. Well, let's just bring last year's sacrifice. Bring the sacrifice from last year. That we'll bring from last year's grain. This year's grain I'm not allowed to burn, because this year is the 7th year, it's Shemitah. But last year's grain, according to these opinions, certain opinions that we just learned, you could bring from last year's grain, not from our Mishnah, but from the other opinions that said that you can bring from last year's grain. So we'll bring from last year's grain. Thank you. It says Carmel. It needs to be fresh. You can't bring from last year's grain. Veleka, it's not fresh. So Velesi mi Carmel deshtakit. Let's bring from the grain that was ripened last year, and last year it was fresh. This is what they tell you in the bakery. They say it's fresh. They say it's fresh from the freezer. Last year it was fresh. When it was harvested, it was full. It was Amarkra Carmel Takriv. You have to read the pasuk differently. You should bring it fresh. You should offer it fresh. In the pasuk, if you read it, it says Gerish Carmel, fresh cut ground grain. You should bring the mincha, your first mincha. Now, what that means, it depends where you put the comma. If you put the comma after the fresh, then it's describing how you harvested it. But if you put the comma before the fresh, then it's describing how you bring it. So the Gemara is saying, no, you have to bring it fresh. That means you can't bring last year's grain, you need to bring this year's grain. This year's fresh grain. So it needs to be fresh at the time of bringing it, and that's why we need this year's grain, and that's why we need people to guard the fields to make sure that we'll be able to get grain this year for the Omer. Okay, Itmar. It was stated by Amiram. Rabbi Yechanan Amar Carmel Takriv. What we're actually discussing here is a source that you need to have this year's grain for the Korban Omer. So Rabbi Yechanan says that the grain needs to be fresh when you bring it. That means that it needs to be this year's crop. Carmel Takrib. He says that's how you read it. You put the comma before, so that means it's fresh. You shall bring it. Rabbi Elazar, who's a student of Rabbi Yechanan, he says, Reishis Ketzircha, the first of your harvest. Reishis Ketzircha v'lei Seif Ketzircha. If it's from the last year's crop, then it could be that you brought from the end of your harvest. The first of your harvest would have to be this year's crop, because it's just ripening now. So you bring it now. Both of them agree.
Yeah, they agree.
That it needs to be this year's.
Yes.
The question is, from what's the source? Is it the source from the harvesting, or is it the source from the bringing of the Yomer? If it's Rabbi Yechanan says that it needs to be fresh when you bring it, and Rabbi Elazar says it needs to be the first of the harvest. Meisiv Rabbi has a question. Im takriv minchas bikurim. He's quoting a brisa. And when you will bring the mincha of bikurim, this pasuk is the beginning of the pasuk that discusses the Omer. When we discussed that it needs to be roasted in the fire, it needs to be carmel, which means fresh. That it's called, the Omer is called the minchas bikurim, even though bikurim actually means something else. Bikurim means the fruits that are brought after Shavuos, but bikurim means the first, like bechar. It's like a firstborn. So minchas bikurim means the first offering. But minchas Omer akasav medaber. We're talking about the Minchas Omer. That means it's brought on the 16th of Nisan, the second day of Pesach. From what type of grain does it come? Menachem comes from barley. You say that it comes from barley. Maybe it comes from wheat. It's funny, the pasuk doesn't tell us. It doesn't tell us what to bring it from. So we learned this brisa before. We had it before. Where did we have it? We had it last month. So Rabbi Eliezer, Eliezer says, this is not Rabbi Eliezer, this is Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer Agadol, this is a brisa. Rabbi Eliezer says, Nemer Aviv Mitzrayim and Nemer Aviv L'Deiros. When the hail fell in Egypt, the plague of hail, so it says that the barley and the flax was smitten because it was fresh, because it was strong, but the wheat wasn't ripe yet, so that's why it didn't get hit by the hail. It got hit, but it didn't break. But this broke because it was, and it says over there that it was. Why did it get hit? Because it was aviv, because it was fresh, it was ripening. So it says aviv regarding the barley in Egypt. It uses the word aviv. So we're using it's called a gzeir shava. It's taking it from context here. What does it mean here? We're going to say that's what it means here. V'nemar aviv l'deiros, and it says aviv by the minchas ha'omer, by the Omer offering. Aviv kali beish geris carmel. That pasuk says aviv. Ma aviv aviv mitzrayim sairim, just like the aviv that was mentioned in Egypt is referring to barley, as it says clearly in the pasuk. Af aviv aviv l'deiros in abala min asairim. Okay, Rabbi Eliezer says, that's how I know that the Omer was barley, from the word aviv. And I know in other contexts that aviv means barley. It really means ripe. But he says, over there, aviv meant ripe barley. So over here we'll say it means ripe barley. Rabbi Akiva says, it's a different source, that the Omer is brought from barley. We find that an individual brings his offering. This is a brisa. This is a brisa that Rabbi is quoting, and he has a question. Rabbi Akiva is a Tana. He's arguing with Rabbi Eliezer on the source. He says we find that an individual brings an obligation offering from wheat. That's if he does certain sins and he doesn't bring the animal sacrifice, so he brings if he doesn't have the means, so he brings a meal offering instead. He brings it from wheat. Maybe we also find that an individual brings a obligatory offering from barley. Who does that? The saita, the woman that's warned, she brings a barley offering. Okay, so the community also is going to have an obligatory offering from wheat, and it's going to have an obligatory offering from barley. What's the obligatory offering from wheat? That's the shtei alechem. What's the obligatory offering from barley? That's going to be the Omer. But if you say the Omer is from wheat, we're not going to have a barley offering that the community has an obligation to bring. There's no barley offering in all of the seasons, throughout the year. There's no obligatory barley offering for the community. The only one that we could possibly have is the Omer. So we'll say it must be the Omer. Davar acher, another way of understanding why it's barley. If you say that the Omer comes from wheat, then the 2 loaves of bread that are brought on Shavuos won't be the first. Alma mishum bikurim hu. Okay, but what he's saying here is that what the Gemara is saying is that the shtei alechem needs to be the first offering. Now, if that's the case, so the term bikurim is said by the shtei alechem. If that's the case, then the term bikurim also says by the Omer. Now, if the term bikurim by the Omer, we were discussing, how do we know that the Omer needs to be from the new grain? How do we know that the Omer needs to be from the new grain? So we had 2 opinions. One was because it ripened. One was because it says Carmel Takrib, you have to bring from the fresh. And the other one says because it needs to be the first of the harvest. So he's saying that, how do we know that it needs to be from barley? He says because it says bikurim. It says bikurim by the shtei alechem, but it also says bikurim by the Bais doesn't even mention the Omer needs to be bikurim. It's just an assumption that we have after the Bais is finished. All the Bais said was that the shtei alechem needs to be bikurim, the first offering. But that also tells me, I can derive from that the Omer is also bikurim, because it says also bikurim, minchas bikurim. Yimtaka minchas bikurim la'Hashem. So what comes out is that if the Omer also needs to be bikurim, then obviously it's because it needs to be the first crop, the first of the harvest. Now, that's a proof to Rabbi Elazar that said that how do we know that it needs to be this year's crop? It's because it needs to be the first of the harvest. Rabbi Yochanan didn't talk about the harvest. He spoke about that it needs to be fresh. We said it's a kasha on Rabbi Yochanan. Gemara says Tiyufta. Levis has a question on Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan was bringing in a side reason why it needs to be this year's crop, and he didn't mention and he doesn't say the reason that Rabbi Akiva says, which is Rabbi Akiva's Tana. He says the reason is because of bikurim. Okay, Tanan Hassam. It was taught over there that ein miviim bikurim. We mentioned bikurim. Now we're going to the actual bikurim. Bikurim means the first of the fruits that you bring to the temple, which is brought from Shavuos and onwards until Sukkot. Ein meviim bikurim chutz mishavas aminim. Bikurim are not brought from anything outside the 7 species that Israel is praised with. V'loi mitmarim shebaharim v'loi miperish sheba'amakim. You can't bring it from the dates that are on the mountains, and you can't bring it from the fruits that are in the valleys. Why? It's poor quality. The dates that grow on the mountains are poor quality, and the fruits that grow in the valleys are also poor quality. So you need to have the best fruits that you should bring the bikurim from. Amar Ula. Ula adds on to this Mishnah. He says, Im hevi lekiddush. If you bring it, it's not even holy. If you bring the poor quality, it's not even holy. Yosef Rabba. So Rabba was sitting, and he said over this statement from Ula. Esri Rabacha bar Rabba l'Rabba. Some say it's Rabacha bar Huna l'Rabba. The Ravacha asks to Rabba. It says Karban Rashis. It says that regarding the Bikurim, that this is the first sacrifice. It says that the sacrifice is not brought on the altar, but it's the first offering. Shetei Rashis l'chol Menachos. That this should be Karban Rashis is referring to the Bikurim, but the Gemara understands it that it's also referring to the Shtei Alechem. You see, both the Bikurim and the Shtei Alechem begin on Shavuos. The Shtei Alechem is brought on Shavuos, and the Bikurim, which is the first fruits, Shtei Alechem is a community offering. Bikurim is a private offering. The 2 loaves of bread that are brought on Shavuos for the community offering is called Karban Rashis, together with the Bikurim, which is also called Karban Rashis. So this is the first of the offerings. And now we're discussing that it says by Bikurim Karban Rashis, and we say that it's referring to the Shtei Alechem as well, which is the first of the Menachos. That means that you're not allowed to bring any of the new crops to the temple before the Shtei Alechem is brought, before the Shavuos offering is brought. That's the first of the new crops. V'chinu Waimer. It also says, "Ba'krivchem mincha chadash l'Hashem b'Shvuos." And when you will bring the new mincha to Hashem on your Shavuos, Eily ala chadash shalchitim. I only know that this is the first of the wheat offerings. Maybe I can bring a barley offering before Shavuos from the new crop. It doesn't say it. It just says it's the first of your offering. Maybe it's only the specific type of what I'm bringing, which is the Shtei Alechem is brought wheat. This is the first of the wheat offering. But let's say there was a Saita that wanted to bring her offering. She's probably forced to bring her offering. And it's a barley offering. And she only has the new crop or whatever. It's easier for her to get the new grain, not the old grain. So how do you know that she's not allowed to bring from the new grain?